You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Cimino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer. Hey listeners, welcome to October 1st, starting a new month. Today we have Dr. Jeff Wishart back to the show. He's an adjunct professor at Arizona State University. Welcome back, Jeff.
Thanks, Anthony. Great to see you guys.
Yeah, so
happy to be back.
We're going to get into we're going to deep dive into a couple articles you wrote recently. One, Dynamic Driving Task Assessment, Metrics for Automated Driving Systems. And another one, Safety Impacts of Active Safety and Driving Automation Features. So I started going through the Dynamic Driving Task Assessment metrics. That is a mouthful.
Yeah. Apologies for that.
No, it's great. So let's start off first on a very high level. What exactly is this? What has your research been around?
So this is coming through SE Standards, SE International Standards body. So it's a standards development organization, and this is the On-Road Automated Driving Committee, of which Fred is also a member. We're developing standards documents for the automated driving system industry. And so this is a recommended practice. So they have three different tiers. The lowest tier is information report, then a recommended practice, and then a standard, basically an order of consensus that we see from the stakeholders. And so this recommended practice is around what do you have to measure in order to make an assessment for the dynamic driving task, DDT, performance of an automated vehicle. And so right now, some of your listeners probably know that all we have at the moment are crash data that comes through the standing general order from NHTSA. And that's useful in a lot of ways, but it doesn't get us everything that we need, and not by a long shot. So this recommended practice is the motivation is to have a set of metrics. So no single metric will be sufficient, but a set of metrics that can be used to make that overall assessment. And so this is the first step in what I foresee to be a series of documents to get to that place where we can make an evaluation of how these AVs are performing out on public roads, because right now we really don't know all that much.
Okay, so we've seen situations where Waymo, as we've called it, is driving drunk, because it will go into the wrong lane of traffic, do this for a while, and then come back. And like you're saying, we only have the information when they hit a stationary object, like they hit in an alley, they hit that light pole or telephone pole. But even that, we're not getting the data before that necessarily of why did it think this was okay? We don't, and these situations where it crosses other lanes of traffic, we have no idea of why that happened. Waymo just, puts out a PR press release, and Fred comments on it and says, "You guys aren't safe. You're, get off my lawn." So is this to try and make manufacturers, these developers, to say, "Hey, let's be a lot more transparent. This is why this situation happened"?
We don't get into the policy of whether developers should be more transparent or not, although I'm certainly supportive of that. What I would say is that, as you stated there, we don't get any data unless it shows up in the SGO or someone happens to film it. Somehow the press finds out about an incident. But none of these incidents that rise to the level of a crash do we get. We miss a lot of them, right? So these metrics are a way to get some of those data, find out about some of those incidents, find out about how these vehicles are performing. And I should note that these metrics can be used in the development process, so in simulation on a closed course, but they can also be used once vehicles are out on public roads, whether they're still in the testing phase with fallback test drivers or in the deployment phase where they're actually commercialized. So these metrics are universally applicable.
Yeah, you have to assume that manufacturers are using some of these or something similar to this right now. I mean, we at least hope so. Just for, internal error reporting or to assist them in developing and improving their operations. Obviously, they're probably not using all of these or an exact copy of this, and this, the AD metrics only apply to the vehicle performance measures and not to a lot of other things involving AVs, like the passenger, how the passengers are treated, and all sorts of other things. But it seems like they have a much broader range of use cases beyond simply the internal company reporting. We talked a little about transparency, but also would they allow possibly at some point, for comparison, between AV manufacturers, safety records, or for, more advanced reporting of crash or disengagement information to regulators? I was even thinking along the lines of an autonomous vehicle NCAP, where we could actually take some of this data and compare AV companies so that it incentivizes the ones who are bringing up the rear to raise their level of operation, that type of thing.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Let me jump in if I may. I just want to give a little additional context. The state of the art right now, if you will, for safety reporting by the companies and basically the information that they provide to regulators is essentially, we haven't killed anybody yet, or we haven't killed too many people yet. And that's the only data that they accumulate. And, except for the total number of miles that they've driven using some form of the software that's associated with the cars. So the need exists for government, for public, for people like us, safety advocates, to look deeper into the vehicles. For example, what you'd want to know is that each successive software release being used to run the autonomous vehicles is providing better results than the previous one. But if the only data that you're getting is, well, we still haven't killed anybody, then you can't really compare the evolution of the software or the evolution of the safety, or even the progress towards a known goal that is somewhat less than we haven't killed anybody. For example, you might want to have a goal to say, well, we want to have a crash rate of X crashes per 1,000 miles. All right. Well, how do you do that if the only thing you're recording is the numbers of deaths associated with it, or even what they're doing now is looking at the total number of crashes, but rejecting the crashes that they say are not their fault. So, clearly the presence of an autonomous vehicle in a crash scenario is a factor in that crash evolving. If the autonomous vehicle isn't there, the crash would never have occurred. But if you reject all of the instances of a crash where the vehicle is deemed not at fault, which is a legal term, not an engineering term, then you don't really have any basis of statistics or metrics to say, well, we're getting better, or we're getting worse, or we should have done this, or we should not have done that. So that's the gap that Jeff is really trying to fill with this report. What is the basis for rational collection of metrics that can be used to assess the operational safety of a vehicle, to assess the operational characteristics of a vehicle, short of we haven't killed anybody yet, because we, the public and the regulators, need to be able to have some insights into what the evolution of the technology and what the experience gained is having, and what is the effect that that's having on the overall safety of the vehicles. And that's exactly the gap that this report that Jeff chaired, and Jeff is largely responsible for, intends to fill. Right, Jeff?
You guys are both exactly right. You and Michael. I think I'll address your points first, Fred. You guys have been talking about that really unfortunate incident in Tempe. Again, I have the unfortunate circumstances of living near to the two most famous deaths that have occurred because of automated vehicles, both very different. One in testing, one when Uber, ATG, and now with the Waymo vehicle. And to Fred's point, if you don't count any of the crashes that aren't your fault, you don't learn. If you're doing something that, yes, maybe everything you did was legal, but it's not necessarily what the other road users around you are expecting. So that could be a problem. And we know that AVs have historically had issues of getting rear-ended. In this case, they got rear-ended by the motorcyclist when they're making a right-hand turn. I'm not sure exactly. We don't know the details of this unfortunate incident. But we know that historically, there's something about the way that AVs make that right-hand turn, usually at an intersection, that with a lighted intersection, that is causing human drivers to crash into them, resulting in human drivers crashing into the back. And to your point, Michael, yes, I'm sure that the companies are using some version of or their own set of metrics, and we did have industry people as part of the development team. So got a lot of input from industry, which is great. What this is trying to do is have a common language so that everyone's using the same metrics, so that, as you say, we can make comparisons between two different manufacturers' vehicles, or between, to Fred's point, manufacturers' vehicles if they make a change. So that's really important. And that, as I said, that's further down the road. This is just the first step of metrics. And I'll get to another point you made, Michael, which is this is just part of the overall performance that's really important to look into. And so right now, the DDT metrics, DDT assessment metrics, DA metrics, as we call them in this report, SAE J3237, for listeners who want to search that, is only what I call nominal driving. So this is when things are pretty much normal. This is we can use these metrics to measure the performance. But there are other aspects of the driving performance that you care about. So if you leave your operational design domain, for example, or you have some sort of failure that requires that the automated driving system can no longer perform the trip, it goes into what's called DDT fallback. And so then you get your mitigated risk condition at the end with mitigated risk maneuvers, one or more, to get to that end condition. And so there are a whole set of metrics that we'll need to develop to evaluate that, the performance of that.
Yeah.
In addition,
I like even maybe a set of metrics that make sure, the software and hardware is working properly,
I'll get into that after I make the next point about crash avoidance. So as I said, there's nominal, now we have DDT fallback, and then we have crash avoidance metrics. So if you're trying to avoid a crash that's imminent, there are all sorts of metrics that we could develop to measure that the ability of the AV to avoid or mitigate that crash. But as you said, there are all sorts of other metrics. Do you care about the occupant? Do you care about how about the remote operations? What about the fleet maintenance? There are all sorts of operational metrics. And I'll say this, that I just proposed a new task force under the ORAD committee called for Operations Task Force, because as we get more of these vehicles out on public roads, we need to be thinking more about operations in particular. And so they'll get into all of, or hopefully, I'm not the chair, we'll get into all of those issues. But I guess to your point, Michael, about the getting information on the subsystems. So in J3237, we have a taxonomy of black, gray, and white box metrics. So black box metrics are metrics that don't need any data coming from the automated driving system. They don't actually even need any data coming from the vehicle itself. You can get everything from off-board sources such as a camera at an intersection. The measurement uncertainty will be different depending on where you get your measurement. Gray box metrics you need some limited access to the automated driving system, but it's just status messages, so it's nothing too proprietary. And then white box metrics, you need some limited, less limited, more extensive access to the automated driving system. And we did this because when I first started the research behind this recommended practice, I was working with Intel Mobileye and other AV developers. And it became very clear that the data, they're very sensitive around data, and rightfully so. And so a lot of the times there have been times when they've been asked to provide data without a real purpose behind it. And this just say they've been told, just give us all your data. Well, what are you going to do with it? And that's not the situation we wanted to be in. So we wanted to think of, okay, on the white box metrics, what do we need that will give some insight into some subsystems like the perception, but we don't need to get into anything too proprietary that's really sensitive to the developers. And so this is the first iteration, and maybe we'll find that we need to delve a little bit more deeply into the white box metrics and add some more. But we started with a gentle touch. Hopefully we can get industry behind it, and then we'll see how that goes. And again, we'll iterate as necessary as we hopefully get people implementing this recommended practice, and we'll get feedback on what's working and what isn't.
Before we go too much further, there's been a lot of acronyms thrown around, and Joe, just so we can define a few of them, we had DDT, which I thought was a wrestling move, DA, a whole bunch of things. So just so for the non-technical listeners at home.
Yeah, I try not to use too many when I speak, although I'm sure that I do. So DDT, dynamic driving task. DA is the DDT assessment, so dynamic driving task assessment.
Got it.
ODD, operational design domain, and ADS, automated driving system.
Perfect. Thank you. What dynamic driving task? This just is the action of driving the vehicle, right?
All the things that you would need to do in order to operate your vehicle. So it includes the monitoring the environment for different events and objects. It includes things like turning on your signal, which not everyone does, as you guys discuss a lot. But it's all the maneuvers and behaviors that you need to engage in to operate your vehicle.
Okay. So I've got a question about one of your black box options here, because this relates to what you're saying is a lot of issues these vehicles have is they act in ways that other road users don't expect. And exactly. So one of the black boxes is traffic law violation. And as drivers, we know there's certain traffic laws that we just don't follow. And it's not that we're being scofflaws. Like, for example, I've mentioned, living in New York City, you're regularly going through red lights because that's what everyone else expects you to do, and that's the only way to move through. Or I have a situation where I think I mentioned here where there's a off and off ramp. It said, all traffic to the right, but nobody went that way because you'd loop around people selling guns and drugs, and so everyone would make a left turn, crossing over a lane. Until one day a cop stopped me and gave me a $275 ticket and 3 points on my license. With AVs being programmed to strictly follow the law, one would assume there's all these edge cases that we as human drivers do not obey and do not follow, and we're not being dangerous. How is something like that handled?
It's a good question and a tough one. I think of a couple of examples in addition to yours, like if the rest of traffic is going at 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, you follow the speed limit, or do you follow the speed of traffic? And then there's the infamous Pittsburgh left, which is not codified in law, but I guess people do it in Pittsburgh. I've never been there, so I don't know. But people tell me that it's true, and that's a tough one. And again, this recommended practice doesn't have anything to say about that. It just says, did you violate the law or not? And then what you do with that information is up to the implementer or the evaluator of the implementer. But I would say it's a tough call. I think we want our AVs to follow the traffic laws, but maybe we'll get to a point where certain ones are flexible. And in certain situations, we'll want them to break the law. So, for example, if there's a tree that's fallen down and covering across the entire lane, and there's a human traffic controller, probably a police officer, directing people to go over a double line to go around the tree, you want them to be able to do that. So in certain instances, you'd want that capability. But in general, I would say that we wouldn't want people to break the traffic laws. But we don't have the data to really support. I don't think we have data to support breaking traffic laws, but I guess we don't have the data to support never breaking traffic laws, as you in certain instances, like you mentioned.
Yeah, Anthony, let me just say that there's not a lot of evidence that the AVs are being designed to always obey the law. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, reports from San Francisco mostly about cars infringing on crosswalks, endangering children, endangering crossing guards, going the wrong way up streets, et cetera. So it seems like the programmers are constantly hedging the obeying traffic laws versus the expediency of zooming along at more than legal speeds, or in ways that a human driver is trained not to operate a vehicle. So,
but that
sorry,
no, I wonder, like, is that they're not being programmed to follow these laws, or their perception systems are failing somehow? And so
we have no way of knowing.
Well, that's what I would ask Jeff is because you had traffic law violations in black box where you're like, we don't need access directly to the data, but wouldn't you need access directly to the data to figure out why it violated a traffic law?
On some level, we don't. If I'm a regulator, I'm just going to put on a regulator hat for a second. I don't care. If you broke the traffic law, I'm going to say I'm going to do with that in a certain way, perhaps. I don't need to know why you did it. Maybe I do want to know. And then if you were, let's say you're in NHTSA, you could start a safety defect investigation. Okay, we find out that AV developer X is breaking, doing a lot of traffic law violations. Now we need to investigate, and then we would have a conversation where we're getting more of the data. But I think just knowing that you're breaking the traffic laws is, I guess, as a first step and something that we can all agree upon is normally a bad thing.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So that's now I understand the black box, gray box, white box a little bit more. It's from the perspective of the regulators, what they need, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But we will hopefully be getting feedback from regulators and say, oh, we need this, or we need that, or we don't need this, right? Perhaps we'll get that too. So this is the first version of this document, and it's the first version really anywhere in the world of a set of metrics. So this is we're breaking new ground here. So maybe we'll find that people have thoughts once they start implementing, and that's my strong hope.
So do you imagine a kind of update to NCAP, the new car assessment program, related to this? Like what, besides everyone having the same nomenclature and being able to speak the same way, like what's your hope?
Yeah, that would be my dream. I think that we would need to be not just when I think of a test program to evaluate AVs, it can't just be a series of movements that you could program towards and train the AV to pass, right? It has to be, I see a whole randomized, a whole program that includes randomized scenario selection. So you would randomize a lot of parameters in all sorts of different scenarios that they wouldn't know in advance, and they would have to run through that and perform using these metrics, perform to a certain level. And I think I've talked on the show before about other research that I've done where I've taken the metrics that I helped develop and created a methodology to give you a score out of 100. So if you did a left-hand turn at a signalized intersection, how did you do it? Did you stay in your lane? Did you almost hit any pedestrians? All these sorts of things. Did you follow all the laws? Did you not avoid all the other road users within a certain margin? All these sorts of things that would go into calculating your score, and then you get that score, and maybe you have to get an 80 to a pass, or maybe it's a 90. That's up to the regulator. So I would foresee a whole testing program that could be an NCAP, it could be FMVSS. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. This set of metrics could be used in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, I like the idea of randomization because that's something that we don't currently see in NCAP, where I think it's a valid criticism that manufacturers are able to design to pass the NCAP tests or the IHS tests or these very specific protocols. But, in terms of overall safety, where does that really get you?
Yeah, yeah, and we saw that in the fuel economy with the Dieselgate, right?
Yeah.
They were. It's not just that one company. It was other companies that you know exactly what test you're going to run. So you tune your engine or your powertrain for that drive cycle, and that's not ideal, right?
Yeah.
We want real world. There are lots of different real world applications and ways of driving. So and for AVs, all the different scenarios that they have to encounter in the real world. So you need to be able to get some sort of the analogy obviously is to the human driver test, where you go out and they ask you to make a turn, they ask you to parallel park, you drive around for a little bit. Now they're not testing everything, but because they can't, but they get a feel for how well that particular human driver can complete the DDT, dynamic driving task. But in this case, we have the ability to do it in a lot of this in simulation, so we can do a lot more scenarios, and hopefully we'll get to a point where we can get some confidence that the ADS under test has some competency.
One of the things we've advocated for here is that the government set up a series of tests that explores the corners of the performance envelope necessary to determine that an AV is acceptably safe, right? So high-speed turns or low-speed turns or whatever it is, there are certain tests that you could set up that give you reasonable confidence that the AV is going to be able to perform properly in a real-world environment. What Jeff has done here is provided a language for the discussion of that envelope and figure out how you would actually determine what those envelope corners are, and then how would you measure the performance of the vehicle in those corners of the envelope. So it's extremely valuable, and as Jeff said, this is the world's first really foray into this environment. Very important work.
Appreciate that, Fred.
How would this work? 'Cause I imagine a lot of AV companies would be like, "Oh, you're testing this version, but we just put a hot patch in. We just upgraded, so that is not relevant anymore." Or even worse than that, you're testing one version and we slipped out an update. We didn't tell you about it and we didn't run any tests on it. And, it broke left turn signals. So this car is only for sale in Massachusetts since they don't use left turn signals.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real open question. And so another publication that came out this year, I led a team for the SE Edge research report, and Fred's a contributing contributor to that report. We don't know. And so I in that report, I talk about Waymo and their performance. They're the only company's vehicles that we have any sort of data on that we can make an evaluation of performance. But as you say, if they make a change, what does that mean for the previous miles under the previous software version? Or if they make some sort of other design change, maybe they take away a sensor, or they change sensor.
Or they add a sensor.
They change the location of the sensor. Right. They change the calibration of that sensor. Any design change, it's an open question of how big a change does it need to be before the previous data are irrelevant. And so that's we don't have an answer to that question at the moment.
Yeah, because I think just as a human driver, every time you need to renew your license in person, they make you take an eye test again. Because a decade has passed or whatnot.
They do, not in Arizona where I live.
That's state dependent.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. New York does that because it's hilarious. Because when I was like 16, they had that I had to wear corrective lenses, but years later I had LASIK, and they're like, still got to take it, and I'm like, all right. And they're like, yeah, we're not removing this from your license. I'm like, okay.
In Arizona, you get your license, and then it's like for 50 years. So you don't need to go back and renew for some ridiculous amount of time. And a lot can happen in 50 years. It's not just your eyesight going.
Right. Wow. Okay. Yeah. States' rights, everybody. Hey, and if you like states' rights, go to autosafety.org and click on donate. I had to throw it in there somewhere. I didn't know where it was going to be, but hey, that's how this happens.
Did they have Piggly Wigglies in Arizona?
I don't believe so. I wondered if that was going to come up, but no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I wish.
So let's get into some of your equations here a little bit more, because I know Michael and I were talking about this briefly beforehand, and we're going, we got the wrong degree, man. What's going on here? So there's one, you have a formulation here, and it's the measured boundary over the safety envelope boundary, and this equals the SIR. And obviously, we're not going to. What does this mean to the average person? Like, what are you? Is this the scoring you're just talking about? Is this?
No, it's still upstream of the scoring. Okay. So this is a safety envelope ratio. So the SIR. This is a black box metric. So there are the first portion of the meat of the document are these safety envelope metrics. So safety envelope is what's called the spatiotemporal boundary. So it's the space around your vehicle that between you and other road users. And most people know that you should keep some space, right, between you and other road users. And so if you say that I should be, say, 10 meters behind the vehicle in front of me based on our speeds in a car following situation, and so that's, let's say the ratio is 5. If I go down to such that the ratio is now 4, that's a violation. So it's a SIR violation. So that's one of the safety envelope metrics that we have. We also have if it's supposed to be 10 and I cause it to be 9 meters, or I guess I should say feet in the US, then we have a safety envelope violation. But if the vehicle, if I'm the vehicle in front and the vehicle behind me is the one that causes the infringement, now that's just a safety envelope infringement. So we distinguish between those two things. And then, regardless of who causes the safety envelope infringement, you should always restore your safety envelope time within a certain time frame. And so if I make it so that it's 9 meters, I should bring it back to 10 meters and in a certain amount of time.
I love that. I think I wish human drivers had that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these are applicable to human drivers. It's not just automated driving systems that should drive with a safety envelope that they maintain and at a safe distance, right? A lot of human drivers don't follow defensive safe driving techniques, as you guys talk about a lot.
No, it's very offensive.
Yeah.
So these papers are both relatively new. I mean, as the SA paper, has this actually been published so far?
Yeah, it came out in August.
Oh, wow.
So it's fairly hot off the press. Okay. The SE Edge research report, I think, was in April.
Okay. What's been the industry feedback?
So far, I've had a lot of interest. I've gotten on calls with people from different companies who want to learn more. So that I think that's promising. And I get on a call. I'm happy to talk to anybody. So if anyone's listening and wants to learn more, I'm happy to jump on a call to explain, walk through. I've got a PowerPoint that has a whole sort of an explainer. And we walk through the different metrics, and so I can describe all of the features. So, I mean, all of the metrics have a bunch of characteristics that help give information. So they each have a definition. They each have assumptions and subjectivity. They each have observable variables. They each have the formulation that you mentioned earlier, Anthony. Applicability, where is this metric applicable? And then we give an example usage to show how you could use this metric. So each metric has that same structure. So we can talk. I could talk people through that. And so I'm getting good feedback there. I think regulators are interested both at the national, state, and city levels. So far so good, but it's still pretty early.
That's great to hear.
For any of our listeners, if you want to contact Jeff, just send us a note at contact@autosafety.org, and we'll be happy to refer your request to Jeff.
You realize he just opened it up for you to get a whole bunch of emails about perpetual motion machines.
Well, you guys are going to filter those out, right? So you're my middleman.
Only.
So kind of switching gears to the safety impacts Edge report. Something that we've discussed a good bit is, there's a lot of conversation, at least in the media. I constantly get questions from reporters who are just assume that some of the cruise control assist features, some of the some of the automations that are available in today's vehicles are safety features. And yet we've heard from the Insurance Institute that they did a study on kind of the relationship there. And there's really not a lot of evidence yet that these, cruise control type, assisted driving features are really producing any positive safety outcomes yet. When it comes to that, a lot of the active safety features, automatic emergency braking of all sorts, lane departure, is one, adaptive headlights. There's some other ones that, blind spot monitoring. They do tend to show some pretty easily provable, at least, safety benefits to drivers. Is there, do you have any sense of, where we're moving with the automations? And it seems like they're more geared towards driver convenience in a lot of respects. And they may have, even in some cases, at least as we've discussed a lot with Tesla Autopilot and full self-driving, they may have negative safety consequences.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Michael. So I hope people will read the whole report. But as you say, active safety features, which are intermittent, and they intervene intermittently to correct a human driver. Those are depending on the manufacturer, and there's wide variance between manufacturers, even between models of a single manufacturer. But those have proven benefits, and rear AEB is the best. Frontal AEB is second. I mean, these are really powerful ways of reducing crashes. So I think those are, there's still a lot of work to be done, especially at higher speeds and at nighttime with pedestrians, things like that with AEB. But we know that a lot of these active safety features are very good crash avoidance features. And crash mitigation features too, but hopefully mostly crash avoidance. On the driver support features, so this is SAE level 1, level 2 from SAE J3016. As you say, these are mostly, they could become safety features, but they are right now more convenience features. And we don't have the data to support any guidance or advice that these are safer than a human driver who's with no driving automation features. Especially, as you mentioned, it's the human machine interaction issues. At the level 2, we've got the drivers supervising the vehicle, but as the level 2 system becomes more and more capable, so maybe they can go beyond just a divided highway situation. They can go to surface streets. They can go to parking lots. So all sorts of HMI issues ranging from, do I start to have my skills atrophy because I'm not driving as much, to how do we keep drivers in the loop? Now there are things. There's a system, driver management system, a driver monitoring system, I should say, are like other things, depends on the manufacturer for the implementation, but everything's a proxy, right? You are looking at eye gaze, you're looking at blinking, you're looking at head pose, you're looking at hands touching the wheel, perhaps. You can use different proxies for driver situational awareness, but we don't really have a good understanding of how to make sure that the driver is still in the loop. Now, we need to learn from the aviation industry that has pilots that have been doing this for decades. We need to really think about that. But yeah, as you say, it's far too early to be able to say that these issues are not inherent. And I say that in the report, that we don't know that yet. These may not ever be safer necessarily.
That's surprising that the features like automatic lane departure and active cruise control haven't increased safety.
Well, because active cruise control, it's too early, but if it can cause complacency and to help and for you to tune out. If you're going down a divided highway and you turn on adaptive cruise control, let's say you're still steering, but you've turned on adaptive cruise control, you might be, if it's a very straight highway, you might be able to lose focus. And so you lose situational awareness and become complacent. And if something else were to happen, say there's a vehicle coming in from the lane beside you, cutting in, you may not be sufficiently situationally aware such that you make the right decision. So, and then if you layer on the steering to make it a level 2 system, then you doubly, I guess, or you increase that possibility that you have no longer sufficient situational awareness.
I'm so happy my wife doesn't listen to this podcast because those are my 2 favorite features while driving. But I am still paying attention, people.
Good, okay? Good.
And you're all driving worse than I am.
And we haven't even talked about what that means for level 3, right? Which is if you are sitting as a fallback, what's called a fallback ready user from SAE J3016, you have to be able to take over. If you leave, for example, your operational design domain, you need to be able to take over the vehicle and either take over the dynamic driving task or pull the vehicle over. But we haven't. I haven't seen any instance of a level 3 system where they're enumerating specifically what secondary tasks the fallback ready user can engage in and what they can't. So, for example, can I be reading? Can I be eating? Can I be watching TV on that big screen that's right next to me? Can I be sleeping? Probably not on the latter, but we haven't. I haven't seen, as I said, any instance where they've been specific about those secondary tasks. I think that's really needed.
Well, the marketing's definitely implied that you can play video games, you can do whatever you want. I mean,
yeah, and we need the data to support those decisions on those secondary tasks. I don't think that we do. I've seen ranges of how long it takes a driver who's doing an engaging secondary task to regain situational awareness, and it's up to about 45 seconds, depending on the secondary task, right? So not all secondary tasks are created equal, and not all drivers are created equally either, right? So it's a very tricky situation, and I don't think that we have all the answers yet.
Well, we do now have the metrics to start measuring people's response in some of those situations.
Thank you, Fred. Exactly. It's a start.
Yeah. So you did mention from the aviation industry, we can learn a lot. I mean, besides, to become a pilot, you're highly trained. You also have, air traffic control monitoring you. So you've got backup there as well, telling you to put the iPad down and focus. So you've got all of these systems. Obviously, we're not going to put, some sort of traffic control system inside cars. Sadly, in the United States, we're not going to increase the requirements for getting a driver's license and make it harder like it is in the UK or in Ireland. What other features do you think we could take from that industry, or is that just that's that's not the point of my papers?
No, it's a great question and a tough one. I think you're exactly right that these are trained pilots, and so they get a lot more training than we will ever give our human drivers. I love to talk about the 3 E's to reduce crashes, right? Enforcement, engineering, and education. And so there are certain things that we can do to improve human drivers, but it's very limited, and we won't be able to reach everybody. So we have to focus on enforcement and engineering as well. I think another thing that we have, maybe this is getting too much into the weeds, but another thing that we're learning, or we're trying to take from the aviation industry and their success until recently, are safety cases. And so the industry is talking a lot about safety cases as a way of proving safety, not just saying that safety is priority number 1. It's easy to say, but you have to prove it. So if you make a claim, you have to provide evidence to support that claim. And so that's becoming, there's a consensus in the AV industry that we should be talking about safety cases going forward. So I think that's something that we can learn from the aviation industry as well. But I think it's how do you keep the pilots engaged while autopilot is on? And that's something that they've looked into, and we need to figure out ways to keep our human drivers engaged while their level 2 system is engaged.
One more thing that we could use is from the aviation industry is type certificates. Now, they use type certificates in Europe for new versions of cars that they're putting on the road. In the United States, and Michael, you know the details on this, right? There's no type certificates, and car companies are expected to self-certify.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, there's also the issue that with human drivers, you could get into a rental vehicle tomorrow and you've got a whole new set of features with a whole different set of limitations and capabilities. And no one's reading the manual, the owner's manual, even in their own vehicle, let alone a rental vehicle. So it's a difficult situation. I don't think we even throw airline pilots into a vehicle into a plane they've never learned on before, right? So the human driver situation is difficult.
Yeah, if you're a Boeing pilot, you're not getting into an Airbus and flying that all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. It's not transferable.
Yeah, I had a rental car once where I'm driving and like 45 minutes in, I'm like, oh my God, I'm sweating. I accidentally had turned on the heat seater, the seat heater.
The seat heater.
There you go, heat seater. It was, and then trying to turn that off while I was doing 70 miles per hour on a back. No, I was not doing that. Jeff, are these papers available to the average person, or do you have to be an SAE member?
Good question. If you have a Mobilis subscription, you can get both, but neither are free. Unfortunately, J3016 is free, and I encourage everyone to get a copy and read it, because it's what we call the Bible of taxonomy and definitions for the AV industry. But J3237 is not free, and the Edge Research Report is not free. If people are, I can't send people free versions. I wish I could, but get a Mobilis subscription, maybe perhaps through your institution, and you can get access to these.
You can also go to sae.com and you can wind your way through the website there, and you will be able to buy the reports or get the J3016 report for free.
Yeah. That's sae.org. So .com, you're going to, I don't even know what that website is.
Yeah, don't go
there. My bad. All right.
Don't go there.
Yeah. Only put safe things in a web browser. Don't, if you're unsure, do not do it. Because of in the Edge Case Research Report, you have a great chart here talking about the average % of speed reductions in PAEB. Oh man, PAEB. Another
pedestrian automatic emergency braking.
Okay. But it's very cool where it's breaking out, daylight, high beams, low beams. And it looks like, our friends at Volvo are the clear winners in daylight, but they can't do anything with low beams. Is this what I'm looking at? I know I'm jumping over the place. Saw a nice graph.
Yeah, basically, I think that most vehicles probably have a difference there. They're not as able to detect pedestrians when they have their low beams on as when they have their high beams on. I think that's pretty consistent across manufacturers, but Volvo has a pretty big gap there.
Yeah, it's true. And as I said before, there's a big difference if you're looking at that chart, it's figure 6 on page 13. There's a big difference between the manufacturers. And they might be good in this test, but not as good in the other test. Right. So there's no consistency in who's necessarily the best in everything. And so there's still a lot of room for improvement. Yeah. These are already saving lives. These are active safety features, but there's a lot of room for improvement.
They look like, a lot of them, other than the Volkswagen, are working great during the day, but you get to night and they're kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Exactly.
It was fascinating seeing that. Because everyone talks about, LiDAR is the answer. LiDAR is the answer for everything. But this points out in your paper that depending on the vehicle paint color, maybe it's not that great. Or with pedestrians, what clothing they're wearing.
Yeah, so that's where in my view, a range of sensors is important. Maybe we'll get to a point where a single sensor like camera system will be safe, as safe or perhaps even safer. But I don't think we're at that point yet. And so I think in the near term, a variety of sensors, which each have advantages and disadvantages, is the safer choice at the moment. And so I would say that's, until proven otherwise, that's the case.
Okay, so I want to repeat that. You're saying a variety of sensors together makes sense. Hey, Elon.
Yes.
Elon, this is a good idea. But this is also around, I got to go into this more with the colors, because it also mentions that matte finish it makes the LiDARs less effective. Well, and I'm seeing more and more cars with a matte finish. So are we going to get to a situation where you can't any color car you want except for black? except for matte finish. So
yeah, I mean, if you've got, so a LiDAR is what's called an active sensor because it sends out a light pulse and then it gets returned to its receiver. And so if that return doesn't come, or it doesn't come the way it's expected, you get your data is not as good. So a camera, for example, is not an active sensor; it's a passive sensor, so that doesn't get affected by that. But as we know, cameras don't do very well at night unless we're talking about a thermal camera. So that's where, in this case, a LiDAR might get the data may not be as good for a certain finish on a paint. But then you cover that with your radar, you cover that with your camera, other sensors to make up for the limitations in that instance. If you're relying on a single sensor, you obviously can't do that.
Right. So going through all of this data, when you're putting the edge case paper together in particular, what were the things that stood out to you as being, oh my God, this is not as good as I imagined, or things that you're like, oh, we're in a better place than I imagined?
Active safety, I guess, was really it was clear that we've made big improvements and we still have a lot of ways to go, but that those are already saving lives. So I've got a chart in the paper, just pulling it up, where it shows all of the features and their impacts on crashes. This is table 1 on page 15. Rear automatic braking has a 78% decrease in crashes in this study. And so that's pretty good, right? Yeah. So automatic emergency braking, the frontal, 50 and 56 for different types of crashes. And so that's really good, and we could do better, and we really need to make sure that we can get as many vehicles with the best systems on the road. So that kind of surprised me. It was better than I even anticipated. I guess on the driver support, I was hopeful that I would get more data that showed one way or the other, but because it didn't, I can't really say that I was surprised either way. I suspected that was going to be the case, but I didn't know. And then on the automated driving systems, so levels 3 through 5, level 3, we don't have enough data to really say anything either way as well, because in the US, for example, we only have Mercedes system, and it's been very limited in its deployment. So we don't really have data there. On the level 4, because we don't have any level 5. On level 4 vehicles, we basically have Waymo. And Waymo's done quite well, I would say, and they continue to accumulate miles, and they have their incidents, there's no question, but they also have a lot of crash-free miles. And I don't know about incident-free miles, because as we say, we're only getting crashes and not the J32, 37 metrics. But I guess I'd say caveats to the Waymo data. These are not transferable to any other developer. And Waymo, if they make changes, as we discussed earlier, we can't say that the earlier data are all that relevant. And the Waymo data, their current deployments are mostly in Sunbelt type cities, Phoenix being one where I live. Once they start expanding, I know they're testing in DC, I think New York. That will be interesting, especially in snow. But they still haven't unlocked their highway commercial service, or their service does not go on highways currently. So that will be a very different situation as well. So there are caveats to the Waymo data, but it's quite promising for this one AV developer, I would say.
And any data from the autonomous trucking companies like Kodiak or?
No, we don't get any of those data. If they got in crashes, we get some. But at least another thing about Waymo, most of their data are not peer reviewed. They'll put out some peer reviewed papers, and that's great. I really support Waymo in doing that. I'd love to see more of the data being peer reviewed when they put out their publications. But some of their publications are not peer reviewed. So their safety impact website, and I encourage people to go to it. It's very informative, but it would be better to be peer reviewed. That's just that's the way things work out best in the scientific world. So I think that's promising, but I'd like to see some more peer review.
All right, gentlemen, I'm out of questions. You guys have anything? They look stunned.
I would like to just dive into very briefly the gaslight illumination for this week, because it's very relevant. So if I can do that. Dmitry Dolgov, who's a co-CEO at Waymo, posted a video on LinkedIn, or at least that's where I saw it. And in that video, Waymo avoids crashing into another car. So he's extolling that as an example of Waymo safety. So I looked at that many times, and apparently the Waymo's really traveling at an excessive speed in a congested urban street alongside parked cars. And then all of a sudden, one of those cars reverses from the parking area into the Waymo's path. Now, Waymo took about 1 second after detecting the reversing vehicle before it did anything. And while still traveling at that speed, it came very close to the reversing vehicle. And all of a sudden, the Waymo cranked the wheel 270 degrees. Then it moved into the adjacent lane, which was fortunately unoccupied, then briefly crossed the double line into the opposing travel lane, then steered back and recovered, returns to the previously occupied lane. So Waymo touts this as proof of its operational safety, but they don't have any metrics like Jeff would have wanted from this that describe what happened. And this really doesn't support their safety case, because they would have rejected this in their safety case analysis, because they'd say it's not our fault. So, we're reacting to another reckless maneuver. So from an engineering perspective, it's not really proof of engineering safety. It's an individual event. It's really not part of a parameterized study that is amenable to the metrics. So the questions that I've got after this is, why is this safe? Waymo impinged on another car because Waymo was going too fast for the environment, and there was a high-G maneuver to avoid the accident. But if there were occupants, which is not clear, that might have been really bad for the occupants. Jeff, what?
Yeah, Fred, you're teaming up nicely. I think. Well, if you go to the Waymo website, they talk about crashes, right? They don't talk about situations like this. And so in J3237, as you know, we've got a metric called event response time violations. So if there's an event to which the AV should respond, you can set a threshold beyond which it's a violation. So in this case, you said it was a second. Maybe if you set your time at 0.8 or 0.5, which is often chosen, then you've got a violation. It took too long to react, and it got into a situation because it took so long. So I think we do cover that kind of situation, but we don't cover, as I said, all of the situation of crash avoidance. So, but there are a lot, as people know, if you drive defensively, you can avoid the crash avoidance situation a lot of the time. So yeah, we would cover that with J3237, I think, with that metric. At least that would help. But yeah, I don't know what Waymo is doing internally. They probably have some sort of metric that they would be measuring and keeping track of on that, but I don't know what it actually is.
Right. So these close encounters, they matter. And,
they do.
They can be analyzed if you've got appropriate data collection and you apply the proper metrics to that. But
Agreed.
Note that the crash avoidance in this case was at least partly due to the reversing car's application of brakes once it detected the encroaching Waymo. So there's a lot of factors involved in this. But from the gaslight perspective, this really is not a testament to safety. On the other hand, if Waymo had divulged the statistics that support this and the engineering data that allowed it to happen, and then describe their recovery, then it would be at least a contributor to an overall assessment of what the safety could be. Good or bad, what Waymo is doing here is clearly a gaslight, because they're just not revealing the information necessary to support their claim that this was part of a safety demonstration. So
I would like to see, more incidents where the J3237 metric measurements are provided, or the DA score for a given scenario. So if that score, maybe they get below 80, who knows what their score would be. It would depend on the metrics and the measurements. But that's a way of developers providing information on performance without providing sensitive information, unless they consider performance in any scenario sensitive, which maybe they do. But I think there are ways that we can get to transparency, which I think is good for everybody in the end, with these metrics and perhaps with the DA score.
Oh, I agree. So Waymo and what's that other company? Tesla.
Oops,
if you're listening,
Tesla.
Okay, you've now got a language we can use to communicate. So let's get it on.
Hey, Fred, I'm gonna make your day. Look, it's a new month, and you win
Fred
the gaslight
wins.
this week.
Oh,
You
man,
win.
that's great. No competition, but still,
No.
I'll take the win.
We're abstaining. But yeah, you win. Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think with that, that's the show. Jeff, thanks for coming by. I think this is great. You're doing God's work, because these types of things need to happen. We've talked about this forever, but you're actually doing it, which is wonderful. I would love to see an update to NCAP using your formulations. And then next week we'll have a quiz on every single acronym we've talked about, and that's in your papers.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Will I see you in Tempe in a couple of weeks?
You will.
All right, good. I'll be looking for you. I'll buy you a beer.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Well, thanks you guys. I appreciate the invitation. I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. We're dying to find out updates to this when they happen.
Will do.
All right. Bye-bye.
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 Bye, everybody.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.